Would you share a little bit about your story and your background and how you got into all of this?
Okay, well, I grew up in an allergic household. My mother always had migraines and all kinds of other things. And so I started taking allergy shots when I was 5, took them weekly till I was 18, 17. Can't say they helped, but went off to college, so I stopped. Um, Basically went through all kinds of stuff those years. I started reading health books back in college. I wanted to figure out if there was a perfect diet that gave you basically good health and elongated life and everything. And I went through being a fruitarian and all these other things. Almost got diabetes from being a fruitarian, just from living on too much fruit, and started studying different things. We moved to West Virginia, and we were living in a very moldy house. And I started getting all kinds of symptoms to the point where I was a chiropractor by then. By probably 11 o'clock in the morning, I was done for the day. Just no energy, brain fog, irritable, and so forth. I was collecting old books. So my treatment room had probably 1,000 old books, which definitely were moldy. And so I was breathing in mold all the time. And I started going to some class. I was a muscle tester and applied kinesiologist, and I started going to some classes from Dr. Goodhart, who invented applied kinesiology, and another doctor, and they were talking about food sensitivities and a certain type, ones that cause like headaches and brain fog. And I was in the audience, and they said, "Is there anyone here that gets brain fog and fatigue all the time?" And I raised my hand, and I went up front, and they showed me this way to food test. And they said, "Well, these are problems." And I said, "What do I do for them?" And they said, "Well, we haven't figured that out yet." And so, they gave me some tools, but they weren't able to really give me any remedies. And I started playing around. I started reading books by Sherry Rogers, who was a clinical ecologist, who was very into molds and so forth. And I was able to get samples of different molds and start testing them on people and using different products, which they were decent, but I found that when I was treating molds and funguses on people, a lot of things got better. It could have been anything that got better. It could have been dermatological, could have been headaches, could have been bloating, could have been yeast infections. And so we started doing that. And then anything new that came around, we started testing for. Like suddenly they started talking about electromagnetic fields. And we decided to expose people. And if we didn't find something that, was kind of the newest, greatest thing, it either meant there was a lot of hype in it and people were just using it to make money, or they had, really tunnel vision, or our testing was no good. And then if our testing was no good, we had to figure out ways to change it. And so as time went on, we started testing people for things like chemical sensitivities and metal sensitivities and hypercoagulation and all these different things. And we found that if we could either remove or correct the stressors in people's lives, most chronic problems went away. And it could have been, it didn't matter what the diagnosis was. If it was chronic fatigue, if it was Lyme, if it was Crohn's, a lot of things just improved greatly when you remove the major stressors, which would have been microbes that were out of balance, and foods and metals are probably the three major ones. We also found that a lot of people's supplements are really not good for them. When you think about supplements being healthy, but a lot of the vitamins these days come from GMO bacteria and fungus manufactured in China in factories there. And personally, that doesn't seem like a great way to get, quote, natural vitamins. So, a lot of times we'd help people just by taking them off a lot of stuff. And I worked for a company called Thorne Research, which is a leading vitamin company that a lot of doctors use. I was a quality control person for them, and some other things. I learned a lot about the industry, but I started using more herbs in my practice since they were more natural, and I was learning a lot about them and how to quality test for them and so forth. And we developed our own line of products that have really been helpful as antimicrobials and detox products. And it's just been kind of I'm a perfectionist. So I love getting patients and trying to play detective and figure out what's causing it. There's a saying that anything can cause anything. I mean, we've had people once there was a time where I couldn't walk up steps because my leg hurt so much and no one could fix it. And it turned out I had developed an allergy to salmon. And you would never think, how did salmon do, but different things can cause different things. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's so interesting for sensitivities, especially if somebody isn't able to like figure out what that is for themselves. Like people can be intuitive, but they're really weird ones.
Yeah, I mean, Noah had a case where he had a child who never slept through the night their whole life.
Hmm.
And he tested him on all kinds of things, and he wasn't finding anything. So he decided to pull out his food kit and go into 200 different foods. And he tested 200 different foods, and the only one that showed up was bay leaves. This is like a 3-year-old, and he wasn't going to say anything because that was just so weird. But then he told him, I can't find anything other than bay leaves. And the mom said, wow, I give him bay leaves every day because I thought they're so healthy. And as soon as they removed the bay leaves, the kid started sleeping through the night every night. Um,
Wow.
you have weird stuff like that.
How would people figure this stuff out if they weren't having a some sort of sensitivity test through muscle testing?
Sometimes the labs are good, sometimes they're not. I've done labs, one day after the other and got totally different results. So um, some people are just intuitive. I mean, some people can just hold something and know. I mean, not everybody can do that. Some people think they can do it and can't, but some people really can. Um, Other than that, a lot of it's trial and error. Avoid something for a while or avoid a lot of things for a while. And then if you feel better, put one back at a time. Like in large portions for 2 days. And you might get a symptom that's totally different. Like if you're allergic to corn, for instance, and you go off of it and your headaches go away, and then you might put it back in 2 weeks, but you might end up just being angry and yelling at people. You might get constipated. The symptom might change, but that's probably the only other way you might know.
Hmm.
And muscle testing is not perfect with it. I mean, no system is 100% perfect when it comes to foods.
Okay. Yeah, I was lucky enough to have Noah check me, and he just looked at me. He's like, coffee and chocolate. I was like, come on, Noah. I was like, I know this, but I don't like the reality that coffee and chocolate. So when I left him, I stopped coffee and chocolate. So
Good.
I did.
Unfortunately, those show up on probably 80% of the people.
Really?
Mhm.
Oh, wow. Okay. I could see.
That's the most common of anything we check. And I don't think those are really allergies. I think when coffee and chocolate show up, the caffeine and the theobromine are more liver stressors. And the liver's already stressed from just life in the 21st century, and those take it over. I don't think they're true allergic responses.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's the sensitivity to an overloaded body. And so if
Mhm.
you're to clear all the microbes, most of the food you can reintroduce and people will be okay. I I really love your Mirinda. I found it was really helpful for me in my own body. I was having like weird candida problems or some sort of fungal issue, and so I've tried lots of different things, but I found really good results with it for myself. Would you
That was our first product. Yeah.
really?
I mean, I was developing products for Thorne, and they were in the midst of selling to a different group of people who weren't really interested in doing those things. So um, I went to Kauai. You have time for the story?
Please.
It's a good story. So I went to Kauai. We used to live there, and our friend there owns a taro farm, and we were going to visit. And Noah and my other son and my wife were going to go off and do a zip line, and I was going to help my friend work in the taro field. So we get there and he says, well, I'm glad you're here to work. You're going to get leptospirosis from being in the taro field. And there are these snails in the field that if you step on one, it's going to shave off your toe. It's so sharp.
Oh,
But everybody had left, so I couldn't get out of it. And I worked in taro field, and I didn't get leptospirosis, but he did. And he thought he was immune. And I was thinking, why didn't I get it? And I had been taking some noni fruit leather, and noni is morinda. And I thought, well, maybe it's that. So when I got back to Colorado, where we were living, I started giving it to people who were going on trips, who always like, they're going to a rainforest somewhere, or they're going to just a tropical wet place, and they always come back with fungal issues. And I gave it to them to take, and they came back without fungal issues. So I decided to import morinda or noni from a lot of different places and test it. We got it from Samoa, we got it from India, we got it from Hawaii, and we ended up finding one that tested really well. And a friend of mine decided to work with me to see if we can find an encapsulator who would put it in the capsule without adding any fillers, binders, excipients, etc. And we decided to start selling it to some of the doctors I was teaching, and the results were pretty amazing.
yeah, it really is. How, if you're looking at your supplements, and by being in the industry, you were able to see all the different additives and fake things that are added. I think people don't really understand the supplement companies in what they're doing. I don't even know if the supplement companies know to what degree
A
that,
lot of them don't.
yeah, and it's more just looking at it from that perspective. Which of the ingredients, that the hidden ingredients or additives in right now, do you think is most harmful for
I think
people?
there's two things you need to be aware of. If there's stearic acid in it, which is used as a lubricant so they can encapsulate much quicker and save money, most stearic acid comes from hydrogenated GMO cottonseed oil. So I would definitely be careful about that. If it says vegetable stearic acid, it definitely comes from there. The other thing is in tinctures, if your tinctures aren't tinctured in organic alcohol, it's usually GMO corn alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
So those are two of the things. I mean, obviously some put titanium dioxide in and some put all kinds of other things in, coloring and so forth. But of the more naturally oriented companies, you go into the health food store, those two things are red flags.
Yeah, thank you. It's so interesting to, I think every layer deeper that we learn about something, sometimes it feels more confusing for people because people are really trying hard just to kind of figure out their own health. And it can get really difficult because
Mhm.
they don't know what to eat, they don't know what supplements to take. It feels difficult. I had a question about what is, for microbes, what do you think is the one that feels like most people have? If it's more viral, more parasitic, like what is the commonality of, what does it look like more people suffer from? That's an underlying cause.
I mean, your location is going to make a little bit of a difference there, but I would say fungal issues.
Okay.
I mean, parasites we find in a lot of people, but in general, they're not as symptomatic as fungal issues are. I mean, there are definitely exceptions, but
Okay.
probably 60 to 70% of the people who walk in here has some kind of fungal issue. And, a lot of them don't know it.
Do you think if you address the fungal, it somewhat has almost like a biofilm that you would uncover and your body would be able to see the other microbes?
A lot of times it does. And a lot of the thing is, we treat the fungus with herbs, and most of the herbs are very broad spectrum. Like my favorite herb is Molea, which is also called neem. And neem it's anti-parasitic, it's antifungal, it's antibacterial, it's antiviral. So a lot of times when you treat, the others go away without, even acknowledging that they're there in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
One thing you can do if you really want to, which is really cool, is buy a petri dish um, that checks for like mold in the air and so forth. And you can get it on Amazon. One company called Immunolytics has really good ones. Buy a petri dish, and instead of exposing it to the air, spit in it.
Okay.
and let it grow for 6 days
Mm-hmm.
and see what's growing inside your mouth. See if there's any funguses growing inside your mouth. Sometimes it's really gross. It's very rare that you get a clean sample. I like to do it on patients because once they see what grows, they're happy to follow anything you say. Well, before that, they might be more hesitant to go on a diet, but once they see all the molds and stuff, they're much more compliant.
Mm-hmm. You have a really lovely antifungal diet. Would you talk about that a bit?
Actually it's a really easy one
Yeah.
because all we do is take people off of refined sweetener, honey, sugar, maple syrup, corn syrup, and anything fermented, fungally fermented. So yogurt's bacterially fermented, kimchi's bacterially fermented. So it'd be more like vinegar, alcohol, soy sauce, cheeses that are inoculated with mold, yeast, which would include stuff like kombucha. And to get over the fungus, they basically just need to go off those foods, take the right herb, and make sure they're not being exposed either in their air or with whoever they're involved with. Because if the other person has a fungus too, one kiss is enough to keep reinfecting.
Mm-hmm. As well as animals.
Yes, if you kiss them on the mouth or they lick you on your mouth.
Mm-hmm. What do you do if somebody has an animal that has some sort of fungal problem?
Exact same thing. They do really well with the herbs,
Oh, you can put all the animals on the same herbs.
except for one, which is chrysanthemum, which we call Vital Guard. All the herbs the animals can take, you just have to dose by weight. So think of an average person being 150. So if the animal weighs 15, you give them a tenth the dose.
Oh, and that's it.
Mhm.
It almost seems too easy.
If it's an animal that's outside, with their nose in the compost pile all the time, it might be harder to get a long-term solution. But, if they're not that way, they respond really quickly.
Mhm. Amazing. What I had seen something, a video of you, and you referenced back to the Bible when it comes to fungus.
Yeah, they were treating it however long ago that was, 3 or 4 thousand years ago in the book of Leviticus. I wrote a book on that called God's Preventative Medicine. But they used to treat very rationally. They used to isolate the person because another thing is if you're under stress, the cortisol and the other things you produce, the epinephrine, will make the fungus grow. Those hormones will feed it. And when they isolate the person, beside that they wouldn't infect anyone, they take him out of their environment and put him in somewhere cleaner. You have a lot of time when you're alone for introspection. And hopefully you get to resolve a lot of issues and be less stressed. And that helps tremendously too at the same time.
Yeah, thank you. Would you like to share one of your favorite healing stories that you've been able to witness over the years that like really left an imprint for you?
There was one recently. We had a call from a man in Nicaragua, and he wanted to come up. We live on Maui, and he said, "Do you treat Charcot's foot?" And what went through my mind was, I don't know what Charcot's foot is. Um, so I looked it up, and it was basically a degeneration of usually your leg, secondary to diabetes. And I said, well, I've never treated Charcot's foot. If you want to come, I'll do the best I can. I'll fix what I find. He came for 2 weeks. I had treated him before a long time ago for something else. And he came, he was in a wheelchair. There was no way he could stand because he'd had no strength in his leg and it hurt too much. So for 2 weeks, we treated him like 12 days out of 14. We For the first couple of days, we put him on cucumber juice just to kind of clean him out a little bit. And then we just put him on, he was eating fruits and vegetables and meats, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so he was on that diet. We had him on a couple of herbs and we had him on some lymph massage. He was diabetic, he had high blood pressure. We have a friend here who's a medical doctor the guy was on 7 meds, and my friend was able to help wean off of them. He would look at what the labs were showing and everything. And the guy left 2 weeks later, and basically he still was in a wheelchair, which really depressed me. But his diabetes was gone, his high blood pressure was gone. And I said, well, just keep it up and let's see what happens. So we went back to Nicaragua, and I got like a WhatsApp 2 weeks later, and he was totally fine. The guy could walk perfectly. So he went from a wheelchair to just no issues in a month, which I thought was, you know, amazing. Yeah, I don't take credit for that, but something just healed him in that whole thing.
What did you have him on? What were you addressing?
I know he was on Mangista.
Okay.
Um, he was on a couple of antimicrobials, but I don't remember which. And I think that was it. He was on about four things, but we took him off about. Well, I didn't. My friend, the MD, took him off of about 7 meds, same time.
It's
I mean,
all
it's hard with the herbs, because again, some people like Morinda did great for you. Someone, your friend with the same issue, it might be golden thread. There's a lot of trial and error involved sometimes, which makes it a little bit, but you don't want to give one of these products. Some people say, well, why don't you just take something that has 20 things in it, and it has everything. The thing is, any herb that's strong enough to kill something is strong enough to cause a toxic reaction in you if you don't need it. So typically what happens is people will take something that has 20 things in it. They'll start feeling bad because they're reacting to some of the things, and they'll think, oh, this is great. I'm just having a die-off reaction, which it isn't. And the thing is, even if there's the right things, if two of the things are right and 18 of the things are not right, you don't have enough quantity of the two to really do the job. Because they can only put so much in. It's only a tenth of what's in the capsule.
Mhm.
So it's better to find the exact ones, even if it's a lot of trial and error, and then just go for it with a therapeutic dose. And you usually don't have to take it for more than a few weeks for most people,
Okay. So if someone's on the correct supplement and herbs, you should see some sort of results in a few weeks
assuming that also they're on the right diet. Yes.
and have taken out sensitivities also.
Yes.
If they don't take out sensitivities, do you think that people have a hard time healing?
Well, the sensitivities cause a lot of the symptoms. So, like if I have a fungus, I might not feel that bad, except it causes me to become sensitive to a whole list of foods. So when I eat the food, I end up with a migraine. While if I didn't have a fungus and I ate the food, I wouldn't have the symptom.
Okay. So it puts more
So
people in your body under stress.
yes, I think the finding the foods are really critical.
Okay.
I mean, it used to be a lot easier. 30 years ago, it was so much easier to fix people than it is now.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. How has it changed over how many decades have you been doing this?
Well, I've been doing it since 1980.
Okay.
But then, even if you found stuff, we didn't have all the tools to find everything, but a lot of times you just gave them some adrenal support and everything they had got better. But you have to remember back then, people didn't have as many vaccines by far. They weren't exposed to electromagnetics other than the lamp that they had plugged in the wall or something like that. Um, Houses weren't so tight, so you didn't have all the mold and things in houses. And plus, I think stress levels are through the roof just with all the technology, and we don't get a break from life. We don't have all that veg out time that we used to have. So all of that, I think before that we were exposed to a lot of organisms too, but our bodies could hold them in check. They're basically dormant, and now, they're opportunistic. So you put stress in the body, and suddenly they just grow. I mean, they found, Lyme disease in mummies, and so they probably had it, when I was growing up. But again, most people had it asymptomatically because they didn't have all these other things to kind of sink their ship in a sense.
Hmm. I was looking at blood work this week and I just noticing the relationships between different microbes. And there was a parasite, and beside the parasite, the blood was really dense, and you could see that it was all viral. So there wasn't viral throughout the blood, but it was like hiding near the parasite. And I was thinking, is the viral hiding near the parasite, or is the parasite hiding in the viral, and trying to figure out the relationship. And also if there's when you go after microbes, do you go after them all at the same time, or is there an order of operation to have less die-off symptoms?
We almost never have die-off symptoms,
Okay, great.
um, but we do go after them all at the same time. If you have, like we used to just give this supplements for Candida, say, and let's say you had some parasites and some other fungi growing in there, and we just killed off the Candida. You have all this empty space that needs to be filled, and those organisms are going to take advantage of it. So we basically do everything at once. And again, I think we don't have die-off because we're covering everything. If you take the people off the foods at the same time, you're treating the organs that are deficient. Just killing the things that the dead organisms aren't going to be enough to really kind of tip their scale and go over their threshold level. Their bodies can be so happy that it's off the foods and other things that, basically they'll be able to do it asymptomatically.
Why do you think there are so many people that think that die-off is a good thing, like having symptoms?
If that's what they're taught.
What?
And most, and again, it's taught that that's expected. But if we ever see it, actually, we almost never do. Sometimes our people feel really bad for a couple of days, but those are only the people that we take off caffeine and they're going through withdrawal.
It's real. It's real.
And I guess there are, theoretically, people could have die-off symptoms, but again, it's typically not if the supplements are exactly right and you've removed enough other things from their body that their total load is so much lower that the killing the organism doesn't take them above their threshold.
Okay. I was talking to Noah, and I was talking a little bit about research and like figuring out like which bacteria is the cause of which symptom. And he said, I don't care what it is. He was like, I just test. If it tests positive, I don't care what it's called. I just go after and like look at what your body needs. And I was like, oh, it's like the perspective, but just from the opposite side. And I just really loved it.
I mean, you can do all those exactly what organism and so forth. The thing is, you're going to spend thousands of dollars
Mhm.
and it's not going to help the person get better quicker for 95% of the time. So I used to give the people the option. We can do a CDSA, we can do all these other labs, and you're out $3,000. And by the time they come back, you're probably going to be feeling a lot better from what we did. So we can do the test if you want to spend the money, or we can just know what categories of organisms are affecting you and then, treat that way. And it, again, because it's a so broad spectrum. The other thing is the difference between a lab and what we do, which I think is really important, is labs in terms of microbes are testing presence and quantity. And we are testing sensitivity. So there are people that might have an organism and be totally asymptomatic from it and have a large quantity. There might be someone else that has almost a non-detectable amount, but it's still a teeny bit, but the lab looks great, but they're so sensitive to it that it's causing all their symptoms. So we love to treat what they're sensitive to, not necessarily by presence and quantity.
I understand. Are people getting more sensitive as the world is getting tougher?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, autoimmune diseases through the roof. Definitely. I mean, some people just have great genetics and they can live on, junk food their whole life and, do great. And, other people, they make one or two mistakes and they feel awful. There's a saying, I think Sherry Rogers, who is a medical doctor, came up with it, that if someone nailed 100 nails into your foot and I came and took 50 of them out, would your foot feel better? Now, my wife, if I took two of the 100 out, she would feel amazing. On me, I wouldn't feel better till you took that 100th one out. And those are the people that are kind of the sensitive people that are, coming up with more and more, issues. And what I've been talking about with friends a lot recently, with your generation, I can't decide if you're all going to drop dead at 50 from all of the stuff you're exposed to, or you're all going to live to be 150 because of everything they're figuring out. And I could make a case both ways.
I think it's going to be down the middle.
Mhm.
Actually, there's people who put their energy into really doing the work and learning and figuring it out, and then there's others who kind of just shy away from doing the work, and then their body just catches up with them. It's like thinking about fungal, and then you're thinking about the food and like what's going into the body and all the antibiotics, and it's making it worse. And then I think of like depending on what city you live in. I'm currently in Topanga and they have no 5G. They fought to have all the 5G towers not be here.
Wow.
It's amazing. Our service doesn't work very well, but I'd rather not be around the 5G. But it's like thinking of all the different things that are affecting the body right now. And just to live is hard for people.
And even if something's organic, like take an organic vegetable. I mean, organic is typically better, but when you look at some of the organic fertilizers, so some of the organic fertilizers are things like fish emulsion and seaweed. And fish emulsion and seaweed, usually the poorer quality stuff, so otherwise be for food, is really high in mercury. So you could be feeding your organic vegetables mercury, which will be uptaken in the food. There are different things like that that people don't even think about.
I did not know that. That's kind of crazy. I had only recently learned that it's 80% of boys have problems. It's more neurological problems, and it's because of testosterone. And a friend of mine had done the test where if you had mercury and you had estrogen, estrogen actually protects your brain from the mercury. But if you added testosterone and switched it, it actually it made you more susceptible to having the mercury affect your brain. And so it was this like really important aha moment for me because I understand like from some of your work, the different estrogens that affect fungal. And I think of that being 80% of women are affected by autoimmune. And I was like, there's got to be a yin yang to this. There's got to be another side. And I found out about the neurological for men. And I was like, there's the other piece.
Well, did Noah do this test for you? Did he have you stand up during the class?
Uh, to do, no, I don't know for what.
Okay, stand up.
I have a couch here, but I can't do it. We're standing. Okay. Am I doing a muscle testing forward backwards?
No. So stand up.
Okay.
Okay, and stand on one foot.
Okay.
Okay, and then stand on the other foot. Do you do a lot of yoga?
Do
Okay, this might not work. So stand on the foot that was the easiest to stand on,
the right one.
and close your eyes now. Okay, so people watching can see that you're starting to sway.
Hmm.
If I were to do it, I would fall down if I close my eyes. Usually that's a sign, not all the time, but it's usually a sign of some type of metal toxicity. Now,
Really?
if someone has been doing a lot of yoga, they would do pretty well like you did. But if people really start struggling and they don't do yoga, it's probably some type of metal involved or chemical.
What is it about it when you close the eyes? Is it your brain?
Almost like your body forgets where it is.
Oh, okay.
So it's just an interesting test. If I'm doing a history on people and they have mercury symptoms, which to me could be any weird numbness or tingling, they drool at night when they sleep, they have unprovoked anger or depression, I might have them do that test, just in front of me. And a lot of times they'll pretty much fall over.
Do people not fall over?
Some
In
people,
Oh, okay.
everyone struggles a little bit more. Some people fall over after 5 seconds, some people 10 seconds. If they make it for 10 seconds, I stop the test.
Okay. But some people instantly tip over.
Right. And some people that never gets better, even after you've removed all the metal. It's done some permanent damage for some people.
What's the best way to figure out if there's some sort of heavy metal problem within the body?
The worst way is a hair test. Because
True.
if it's high in the hair, it could be because your body's great at getting rid of it. Or it could mean you have so much that, you also have it in your hair. So hair tests aren't very good. Blood tests are good if it's a recent exposure. When I teach, I always not seriously say the only accurate way to tell how much metal's in your body is cremation,
Okay.
which, we're not going to do, hopefully. So it's hard to say. I mean, you can do a provoked test where you take a chelator like DMSA or DMPS or EDTA, and you do a urine before and a urine after. And if it goes way up, you probably have a lot of stored metals. But sometimes it misses it. On me, it missed it because it was just stored in the nervous system, and that wasn't enough to give me a positive test. So sometimes it's just trial and error. Look at the symptoms, look at your past exposures, and so forth.
Okay. Yeah, it's so interesting. What do you think? What are you learning at the moment that has you most excited?
I've been doing a lot with how the brain affects things.
Oh,
So, like, let's say I was testing you to see what you're sensitive to. And let's say for some reason, either consciously or subconsciously, you think you're sensitive to corn, say. And maybe you are, maybe you're not. Maybe when you were 2 years old, you grabbed a piece of popcorn and your mom slapped you on the finger because she didn't want you to eat it. And, or your grandmother did that to your mother even. So like I might take corn and I might take corn and say, well, I'm going to test you on string beans now,
mhm.
but I'm actually testing you on corn and it doesn't show up. And then I could take a vial like, say, string beans and say, let's test you on corn now. And so you think it's corn and it shows up on the test.
Mhm.
So I've been, doing a lot with how the brain affects what you have a negative response to. Yeah, I mean, we've had people in when we first moved to Colorado, we were taking inpatients. This wound was very chemically sensitive, was staying at our house. We had a guy working on our roof, and it was a super non-toxic house, and he was doing some stuff, and the windows were closed and everything. But just the fact that she saw him working on the roof, she assumed it was a chemical thing, and she started having a chemical reaction. So, how to reprogram those people is kind of a fascinating subject.
I was muscle tested years and years ago, and I would be muscle tested for the allergy and then the belief around the allergy. So even if something was cleared, it was my thought patterns around it. And so I have
Mhm.
extreme allergies to tree nuts and cats. And so if I see a cat, I don't know if I'm allergic to the cat or not anymore, but I'll have a full reaction.
Well, it's still an allergy in a sense. They did these tests with rats, and they raised rats and every time they exposed them to the smell of almond blossoms, they gave them a shock. So eventually, all they needed to do was bring almond blossoms by, and the rats would be terrified. But the fascinating thing was the rats' kids and grandkids were terrified of the smell of almond blossoms, even though they were never shocked.
Oh, wow. So the almost the emotional imprint was put into their DNA and crossed over generations. That's
Right.
what are we doing to our children's children right now with the world?
I know. It's like, I mean, sometimes I find if I stimulate the vagus nerve on people, it'll get them over that reaction.
Okay.
But I haven't done enough practical research to see if it's really going to work on a lot of people or not. And they have to be focusing on it when you're doing it. like focus on, corn or, and then be stimulating their vagus, not, with something more like a vagus nerve stimulator as opposed to just, humming or listening to some, relaxing tune. It has to be a little bit more aggressive than that. But
Mm,
again, it's kind of, I'm not sure how this is all going to turn out, but it looks promising so far.
okay. What's the best way for the vagus nerve right now that you like using?
You could buy a vagus nerve stimulator, but they do cost about $350.
Okay.
And there's something you just put here for like, oh, could be anywhere from 10 seconds to 2 minutes while you're focusing on it. There are all kinds of programs out there like DNRS and GUPTA and so forth. I've done a few of them. I think they have potential for people that are really disciplined. They're an awful lot of work. I was never disciplined enough to get through them enough that it made a change for me.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's so many things for people to look at. It's like, how's your nervous system? How's your stress? What are you eating? What do you think is the most important thing when it comes to healing if you're just looking at it from like a wide lens? Like, what do people have to know them? What is the most important thing for someone to know?
You know, I think you have to be really introspective. And I think you need to get rid of, which is way easier said than done, all of the spiritual and emotional garbage you have. Because
Hmm.
that takes such a load off of your system that you can tolerate so much more.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I say the same thing. I was like, if you hate your job or if you hate your partner, I don't care what you're eating, like nothing's gonna work. You're gonna be sad and upset and nothing, you can't heal from a place.
Yeah,
And
I had a patient way back, and he owned a very successful company where he'd build these different additions to houses, and he was pretty wealthy from it, but he always wanted to live in Italy and be an architect. And he used to come in every year because he'd have a really bad case of pneumonia every year. And we'd get him over it. And then he'd come back next year with pneumonia, and next year with the pneumonia. And then he decided, well, I'm going to sell my company and go to architecture school in Italy. And never had pneumonia again.
yeah, happy people are usually healthier. It's a
Hmm.
funny thing. It's like your natural response to how to take care of yourself is just to take care of yourself spiritually or from a perspective of doing things that show you love yourself.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you can still help the people with, all of this biochemical, nutritional stuff, even if they have a lot of that, but you'll eventually probably plateau.
Yeah.
I mean, you plateau at 50% better. You might plateau at 80% better, but there's always going to be something that stops it, and there's more likelihood that they're going to relapse at some point.
Do you do work in your practice to help people with the emotional pieces?
No.
You're like, I am this part.
I mean, sometimes we do a little bit, but a lot of times it overloads me.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have one supplement, Bodyguard, that kind of helps you with that, but still, you know, I don't really like people crying in my office. It just makes me uncomfortable. And a lot of times we'll refer them out to someone that does either EMDR or brain spotting or something like that, which a lot of times will help a lot of the emotional side of it, not necessarily the spiritual side as much, but it'll at least help it come to the surface so they can be aware of it, and it helps them deal with it also.
Hmm. Yeah. All around healing is the name of the game. And I think it's important for people just to know that healing is a journey.
Mhm.
That going to somebody like, you're going to fix me, you're going to do this for me. It's like, no, no, you are going to do it for yourself.
I mean, we screen our patients. Are you willing to follow a diet for at least 3 or 4 weeks? You know, and if needed, could your partner follow something? Take some pills or follow something if we find you're passing something back and forth. And if they're not willing, I don't really like to spend the time, even though I still might really be able to help. I want every impediment out of the way if possible, that we can do, the absolute best that we can.
It's smart to do that. You don't want to waste your time if someone's not open. It doesn't help them or you.
Right. You totally agree.
How is how is it different on the island? Do you travel when you help people or you just stay home and people come to you?
We get a lot of people that fly in. Um, Noah occasionally travels to treat people. He'll go to Dallas sometimes, he'll go to Nicaragua sometimes. If we're on the road teaching, we might treat a few people while we're wherever we are. So we'll go maybe 3 or 4 times a year to the mainland and teach, but typically we don't travel to do so, and we don't do phone consults typically.
Right.
Because I'm not, there are some people maybe that are gifted enough that they can do some type of testing over the phone. I'm not one of them. And I tend to be a little bit skeptical too sometimes. And so I could do a really good history and make a guess on what they need, but I'm not comfortable when I can't do the best that I can. If there's no one anywhere near them who can treat them, because we have a list of people that we've trained. If there's no one like that, once in a blue moon, no, or I will take someone over the phone and just do a consult. But we rarely do that. We just don't like it. We're kind of too much of a perfectionist,
That's a good thing.
I guess.
I think so. I think it's so. If I would love to have that list. I have people message me and
We don't have a written list.
oh, so it's just in your head.
Yeah, the reason would be, let's say you took a class once, okay? And first of all, we don't end up knowing, do you do the work or not? We know you took a class, and then we don't know, are you an accurate tester? Are you this? Are you that? So, some people, if you didn't include them on the list, would feel really disturbed. And some people, if you included them on the list, but they didn't really warrant being included, but just because they've taken a class, then you wouldn't be happy. So it's all in our head.
Okay, so if I need help, I'll just message you or
Yeah.
Noah.
Who do you know in such and such? And, we'll try to come up with someone.
Yeah, okay. Even if there's a little list and it's like this person's on the East Coast, this person's in the middle of the States, this just a really reliable one.
Ask enough times, you'll see some names repeated a lot. So you'll get to know that.
Okay, lovely.
And
Other
maybe you'll get on the list someday.
maybe. Let's get on the list. I'm just on team of how do we help everybody improve their health. Um,
Mhm.
and whatever avenue is the best way to get there is the one I usually feel most open to.
No, that's really important. I mean, and I think, things like what you do and what Noah does and some other folks on Instagram is just really important. You're making, vast numbers of people aware of things that they need to be aware of.
Thank you. Yeah, I people are like, what are you talking about? I was like, I talk about whatever is present, whatever is real for me, things I'm learning as I go. And I tell people just like not to just trust me because I could absolutely be wrong. And so just to like be inquisitive of what is real or like what has that emotional hit. Like you're like, oh, I think there's something in that. I find
Yeah, I
there's
mean, ideally, people are not self-deceptive and they're intuitive enough that they can see what resonates for them.
Mhm. I think a lot of people that follow me end up having some sort of spiritual practice and they feel more intuitive than others. So maybe it's just how I speak that draws in a certain amount of people, but it's really lovely. And I do think it's important. I think there's so much noise on social media that if somebody has anything good to say, it's better to share it than not.
Mhm. Agreed. You just have to have enough discernment to know what's real and what's not.
Yeah. I was talking to Noah about some thyroid stuff, and there was a bunch of thyroid books I was reading about um, like different deficiencies. when it comes to the thyroid and talking about different seaweeds and like what is the real problem. What do you see when you have thyroid issues in your practice?
Most of the people are already on thyroid meds when they come in.
Yeah.
If they've been on them for a number of years already, a lot of times you can't get them off, but you can still help things. Thyroid hormones are typically made from tyrosine and iodine and a couple of trace minerals. And what's interesting about tyrosine is it turns into two things in the body. It turns into thyroid hormones and it turns into adrenaline or epinephrine. So if you have a stressful life, and you're eating tyrosine, via proteins and so forth, all of it's going to get used up because you have to make a lot of adrenaline to deal with that stress. So you're going to end up with hypothyroidism. You're going to go into the doctor, they're going to put you on thyroid hormone. If they had put you on tyrosine, it would have supplied enough that your body could make epinephrine so you can handle the stress and make thyroid hormone. So a lot of people, if they tend to have an afternoon slump, and they're on thyroid hormone, is because they should have been on tyrosine because that would have supplied both epinephrine, which would have stopped the adrenal afternoon slump and would have helped the thyroid. So we see a lot of that. Some herbs like Tulsi and some others really also help the body produce more epinephrine. But if you looked at the vitamins and minerals we carry in our office, the two things we carry that aren't the herbs that we use are that are probably 80% of what we sell are tyrosine and magnesium. So tyrosine ends up, it increases energy, it increases libido, it increases focus. It ends up being almost a miracle cure for some people. It's much more in women than men. I'm not sure why, but women show a need probably 4-to-1 compared to men. I don't, and if you're the type that internalizes your stress, so, on some subconscious level, you're always running through things from your past or your present, and it's kind of this unending thing. You eat up all your tyrosine, and then you end up with hypothyroid because of that. And it could be nightshades or other things contribute, but the tyrosine deficiency due to over making it an extra need for it is really critical. And women who tend to be low in tyrosine, you get a lot of postpartum depression is one of the symptoms.
Oh,
Because what happens is during the third trimester of pregnancy, the woman with weak adrenals is going to start using the baby's hormones. And so then your baby's going to be born with wiped out adrenals. But then when the baby is born, you're not going to have the baby's hormones to rely on anymore. And your adrenals are already shot. So you end up with postpartum depression that if you took tyrosine, it would really help.
who's your favorite supplier for the tyrosine?
That my favorite supplier decided to stop making it. They were bought out by venture capitalists. And they decided to do away with some products that weren't selling as well as some others. So now sometimes we use pure encapsulation. Sometimes we use allergy research. We're still investigating different ones to see which one, but typically we carry 2 or 3 different brands just because there does seem to be a difference between brands. And we don't know if it's, the manufacturer is different or the processing is different. But, we've had some people where, they run out and then they say, well, it's not convenient to come in for some more. I'm just going to get some random brand on Amazon or something. And then it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. For thyroid function also, do you think that the not having iodine is a huge problem? There's a handful of researchers who are like down
Right.
iodine hole and they're like, this is the problem.
But you can always do that iodine patch test, where you get some iodine and rub it on and see how long it takes. We give out alaria, which is a seaweed that's really high in iodine. That's one of our products. Once in a great while, we would use iodine, but I'd say the ratio of tyrosine to iodine we give for probably every 1 iodine, either as alaria or as a regular iodine supplement, we probably give out 30 bottles of tyrosine. It's just much less common.
Really? Okay. Well, I think that's good to know. I have videos that I wanted to put out, and it's just like from one perspective. Like I love all perspectives. I'm not biased on who's right. It's more of like,
And I might be wrong in terms of iodine deficiency, but in terms of getting rid of the symptoms, this is what has worked for me.
okay.
Because we don't always follow up with labs. Just again, I save the patient money if I can, and I go by more how are you feeling, how are you sleeping, how are your moods, how's your brain clarity, how's your energy.
Mm-hmm. I I learned that like in really basics, it's like T4 and T3. I was like, I don't think people know what it means. Like even I didn't know. And the four is four iodine molecules, and then the T3 is three iodine molecules. And for doctors or whoever practitioners to say iodine is not important for a thyroid problem, I was like, it's literally in the name. Like it's four and three, that's the iodine part. And then realizing that our body moves it to our adrenals, it's to our glands, and that it transports an iodine with two sodium, and that's how it moves. But if it doesn't have the iodine in the body, it ends up taking something else in the halogen family. And
Right.
so when I see it from that perspective, I was like, oh, I can see why you have a ton of endocrine problems. Like if you just have like organ after organ in the same system.
And a lot's going to depend, what's the iodine content of your soil? Like we live in Hawaii, the soil is going to be high in iodine just because of all of, the ocean nearby, and so forth. And, your fish, your seaweed intake, we've last 20, 30 years, seaweed's, been a part of our diet. And so I'd rather get it in a whole form if I could.
Absolutely. I think food first, quality over everything, food, and then we go to herbs and supplements when we really need.
Agreed. I mean, to me, supplements, they have their role. I'm not totally against them. But because of how they're manufactured, and because they don't exist in nature in that form, I tend to look at them more like pharmaceuticals.
Okay. When I say supplements, I'm actually thinking more of your company. Like the people, what do you take? I was like, not very much. Like I really don't.
The one thing we're doing, which this is going to sound really weird, but we're going to make a multi. And
Okay.
I'm really not a big fan of multis. But I woke up one morning a few months ago and I had this voice in my head saying, you should make a multi. You know a lot. You could probably do a better one. And so we've been formulating one. Again, it's vitamins and minerals. So, it's not a natural product, but hopefully in terms of the quality of them, of what's in them and what's not in them, because some people are going to take multis no matter what you say.
Mhm.
And so we're doing that. And one thing we're excited about, but we're not sure if we can pull it off, is we're going to make a sweetening, well, sugar-free, um, sugar alcohol-free gummy for kids as a multi, because most of the ones on the market are just garbage.
It's very true.
And so we're probably about 3 months out at this point
Okay.
from doing it. It won't be a Supreme Nutrition product because we're an herb company. It's
Okay.
just kind of a project of ours, to kind of a fun project.
What do kids feel most deficient in?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Um, it's a little bit hard to tell, because for instance, there's a lot of fatty acid deficiencies out there, but a lot of people don't test on fatty acid supplements because they're too concentrated. So it's a little bit hard to measure that unless you do a lab on people. So a lot of people will just eat things that are high in essential fatty acids. It could be sardines, it could be black cod, it could be grass-fed beef or something like that. And we're just assuming that they're deficient if we haven't done the lab based on different symptoms and so forth. I mean, children, a lot of them have, trace mineral deficiencies, and sometimes even, magnesium and so forth. I mean, Noah's kids were very bizarre because when they grew up, their favorite foods were um, basically dried liver and noni fruit leather.
Oh, wow. That could be a whole company on its own, Noni Snacks.
So, but they were brought up, at least in the beginning, with pretty much uncorrupted taste, so they could go by their intuition on what they needed.
Hmm. That's very different than all other children. I don't know other children that are eating noni and liver as their favorites.
It's not their favorites anymore, but they still like them. But some other things are up there on the list.
Hmm. I have a couple more questions.
Sure.
When you think of skin issues, what comes up for you? Whether it's psoriasis, eczema.
I mean, the biggies are fungus, liver, adrenals, lymph, different things like that. But there are, there's for some things, there's definitely a genetic predisposition that, so some people might have a fungus and one person will get migraines, one person might get psoriasis. Um, a lot of times if you figure out the foods and the microbes, a lot of the skin issues will leave. And then there are some people that are the toughest patients you'll ever have. And, no matter what you do and you have every base covered and they're doing everything they can, they still have it. It's a small minority of people. I happen to be one of them. So I get incredibly frustrated with it. But yeah, there's some, and I don't know if it's just that they've done enough damage in their life, because they didn't start doing things right when they were kids. But, some people are very difficult, but I'd say 80% of them respond really quickly and really well.
Okay. Are you, what skin are you, eczema or psoriasis?
Psoriasis. Like
Oh,
we had a patient 2 months ago with a little kid and their whole body was broken out with psoriasis. And they kept on testing fungal and we would treat it. And they couldn't get better until they changed houses because they lived in a really moldy house. As soon as they left the house, within a couple of weeks, it was all gone.
okay.
Yeah, for me, the only thing that's cleared it at times is UV. So
Hmm.
getting UV light and going to the Blue Lagoon in Iceland.
Sulfur.
No, that's actually silica.
Oh, okay.
It's not a sulfur hot springs, it's a silica hot springs.
I
The
think
sulfur ones are supposed to work really well too, but I don't really have experience in high sulfur ones, though I know of some that are around.
I think I kind of put the two and two together for the sulfur. It was, I think I had a sulfur deficiency, and so the
Mhm.
having a hard time detoxing.
Did
Um,
you take MSM or what do you do for the sulfur?
so part I was like understanding like what garlic is and sulfur, and then also the MSM. I found MSM works really well, but I think with most things, people aren't taking the actual dose in which you're going to see something happen. And so I found for MSM, teaspoon to tablespoon, and put it with water and be grossed out and just drink it. But
Right.
what normal people are taking, they're not going to see any results or like what the amount is. But MSM I found really helpful.
That
Hmm.
was a powder, correct?
That was the powder. I think I was using an like really basic like an Opti MSM that I found really helpful.
And you
Yeah.
were taking like 1 to 2 teaspoons a day.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even more. Like it just depended. I like experimenting and playing with things, especially because my own body, and I found joints got a lot better. But it had similar reaction to garlic. So garlic would turn down the symptoms. But the garlic was magic for me. But I find for other people, the MSM does work because people are also don't really want to eat this much garlic. And they're just like, they just think it's crazy.
Well, I tried it and I did the 5 cloves a day,
Huh?
which is really hard to get down. Just because, and everybody was commenting on how I smelled. Um, Unfortunately for me, it didn't do the trick, but it was definitely a good experiment because I love experimenting too.
Yeah. Where is it on your body?
Um, that well, the worst places are my thighs, but it's spread to a lot of the body at this point.
Okay.
What happened was I didn't have any, and I broke my knee into like 18 pieces, and
Okay.
they put a metal cage around my knee so that the bone could kind of refuse. And my body got a sensitivity reaction to the stainless steel that they put inside my body. And and I had it removed. I convinced him to take it out after a year. But the first place the psoriasis started was on the scar from where they did the surgery. And then it spread from there. So it started as an autoimmune reaction, but even though they took the metal out, it started this chain reaction that I haven't been able to stop, be it carnivore, be it fruitarian, be it, whatever diet, none of them seem to make impact.
Mm-mm. No, so there's lots of cases with psoriasis starting and it being bacterial on the skin.
Mhm.
Um, and depending on which psoriasis it is, it has um, if it's guttate and it's just the teardrops, then the chances are it's going to be strep. Whereas if it's more of the plaque and everywhere, or just like elbows, knees, then it can be strep and or staph. And so
Right.
almost thinking of as like a staph problem and a lymphatic problem, especially because they like dug through skin to get to your knee. And is it on what it's right or left knee
Well, that was left.
in the surgery? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Learn never to text as I'm crossing the street.
The I
'Cause I fell in a pothole and
oh,
shattered my knee.
that's what oh my goodness. That's that's crazy. Well, hard lessons are sometimes hard to learn.
Yeah, but it's what it is.
Yeah, it is.
We're going to go back to Iceland, and then the volcano started erupting last week and wiped out the parking lot of the place that we go, and it's still erupting. So I'm probably not going to make that trip.
Oh wow.
We've got to see a lot of the world chasing interesting clinics.
Yeah. Travel is amazing. You get to learn so much. I think also seeing different kinds of foods and herbs,
Mhm.
different healers, it's getting out of one perspective and seeing like
See,
all.
that's something really important that you just brought up because it used to be when we weren't such an international society, the herbs that you needed all grew where you lived.
Mhm.
Just like jewelweed grows next to poison ivy because it's a remedy for it. So you would get a bacterial or fungal infection that was something native to where you lived, and God would provide those plants. But now it's like, the person you might be from wherever, but then the person in the restaurant who's handling your food might be from anywhere in the world, and all these other people that are flying in. And so we have a much more international repertoire of microbes than we did before. And so we need more of an international repertoire of herbs. That's why some of our herbs come from Africa, and some come from South America, and some come from Eastern Europe. We just need them because we're dealing with a much vaster variety of microbes than we used to.
Yeah. I've been to over 40 countries, so I can only imagine what my gut looks like based on based on the world bacteria of Mexico to Africa and being
Yeah.
sick, really getting
If
exposed.
it was 100 years ago and you were living in Korea and you'd never left Korea your whole life, you just need to eat some kimchi and you'd be fine.
Good. A friend had told me the other night we were at dinner and she's like, "Oh, isn't it weird that gold, you'll find deposits of gold near Mercury?" And I was like, "What?" And I was like, "Really?" And she goes, "Yeah." A friend of hers makes oil of gold, and he also makes another one called Three Kings. And we were just talking about the gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And then he's an alchemist, and so you can bring it down to a tincture. And so talking about it from the perspective of like they didn't like baby Jesus wasn't given just chunks of rocks. I was like, if you look at one, I go, one's an anti-parasitic. If you look at frankincense, we're going to look at anti-inflammatory. And then I figured the piece for the gold is the gold was for metals. And I was like, this is amazing. And
You send us information that because we were going to make one of those combos to see how it did.
for I can send you the friend out. He's maybe in Northern California. Like I don't know where his training has been from, but it's like old school mystic, kind of amazing, like lineage that I would never have known. But I'll send you his stuff. His it's really cool in that when you take the three kings, it's warm. So I'm like, why is it warm? It's like it's the energy of the tincture. And I was like, it's warm. It's crazy, but it's
Wow.
beautiful. Yeah, but I'll send you that one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good because we were wondering how to put gold into the remedy and if that would be a good thing or a bad thing. So that's good to know.
Yeah. His is the only one I like that I would trust. So I can send it to you. He's super smart. He would probably be happy to just to jump on a call and be able to explain the process and how he makes it also.
Good. Now that would be great.
Yeah. Thank you for this. I think we've been on for over an hour, but I really appreciate you and the work you do in the world and your presence for how much it means to you to be able to help other people. So
Well,
thank
thank you for what you're doing. I just wish more people would watch the longer Instagrams instead of just the 90-second ones.
you. Their attention span is really short, and so I'll probably put this just on YouTube, so they'll have access to the whole thing. I really like long content versus like little. I try to like, how do I smash down like this really big idea into 1 minute? So they
Right.
actually really hard. But as long as they get something from it. But I'll post this on I think YouTube. And thank you for everything.
Sure. Is this your full-time endeavor?
I would say it's a majority of my energy. I sometimes have been a healthy chef on and off of boats, and I have a history of like traveling on yachts. And then I miss the water, so sometimes I go back for a friend, captain friend, who's like, I need help. Um, but yeah, I my brain is filled with mostly just health stuff, and all of my time and space is in research papers, and that's what I like, and hanging out with healers.
Neat.
Yeah, but I think you would really like the healer that's in LA right now. He's amazing. It's I've never met somebody to this degree of what he does, and I still can't comprehend really that he's real.
Mhm.
And when you watch things, when you watch people get better almost within a day, or like you can see like the first layer shed and like have huge improvements in front of your eyes, it kind of just looks like little miracles to me. And I don't really know anybody else in the healing space who has access to do what he does. Um,
Just some info on him too.
yeah. I'll send you the info on him. I think, did I send you info? I think I might have sent you his,
But I don't believe I got info.
okay, I'll send you his bio and then some testimonials. I'll just send you a link. He's not online. He doesn't really have anything online. He was protecting his autistic son who's now 23. But
Mhm.
he didn't want like girls trying to date him and Googling his son and like you used to be autistic. He just didn't want that label for him as he was growing up.
Mhm.
So it's changed, but it's kind of like it's amazing what he does, and he goes after all the heavy hitters and he just gets results, and it's just one after another. You get to watch it.
Well, it's good you connected with him.
Yeah, it's really lovely. I'm trying to see if I can just stay here and have him mentor me. So that's the plan right now.
Good, good. Well, thank you for everything.
Thank you too.
If I can ever be of assistance, let me know.
Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
Have a good day.
Bye bye.